My name is Amy Jacobson, and I'm the Executive Director of Prairie Action North Dakota Institute. We call it PANDI. And PANDI is a rapid response communication organization that promotes progressive values, messages, and actions. PANDI combines our communication and our online organizing with offline action to advance progressive solutions in local communities and across North Dakota. And Amplify North Dakota, this here, is sort of our new dynamic online community designed for North Dakotans who are ready to kind of learn, to connect with others, and to take action. Amplify North Dakota will run last month through the legislative session. So you'll be able to see us once a month and join and learn from a lot of folks from all around the state doing great work with values that align with yours. This month's topic is, as you all know, from the courthouse to the Capitol, the future of reproductive health and rights in North Dakota. With so much uncertainty surrounding the future of reproductive rights in our state and in our nation, we know that local connection and local organizing has never been more critical. The same forces that overturned Roe are setting their sights on birth control and beyond, and we know that for a fact. As North Dakotans, we have the opportunity and the responsibility to continue to fight for what we know is right. So today we have a very powerful panel of reproductive advocates this morning who are going to really help us get started and give us some direction. We're going to start today with Meetra. Meetra Mehdizadeh is from the Center for Reproductive Rights, where she represents North Dakota in landmark lawsuits to defend abortion rights, including the ongoing lawsuit against North Dakota's abortion ban. In partnership with Gender Justice, she currently represents Red River Women's Clinic and several dedicated medical providers from North Dakota in that case. Welcome, Meetra.
Thank you, Amy, and thanks for having me here.
Yes. Could you start just really quickly by introducing yourself and sharing a little bit about the work that you've been doing, particularly in North Dakota?
Sure. Hi, everyone. As Amy said, my name is Meetra Mehdizadeh. I'm a senior staff attorney at the Center for Reproductive Rights in New York, and I work on our U.S. litigation team. We challenge restrictions and bans on abortion across the country. But I specifically have been doing a fair amount of work in North Dakota over the past couple of years. And the center has been working in North Dakota for many years before that because, of course, restrictions on abortion did not begin with Dobbs. But yes, we've been very active in challenging first the trigger ban that was set to take effect after Dobbs came down, and now the current abortion ban that was passed in 2023.
Mm-hmm. That's invaluable work. So thank you to the center and for you and to others for taking that up for us here in North Dakota. Can you give us, Meetra, an overview of the North Dakota abortion ban? Like, where it's so confusing to us, here on the ground. Where is it at? What is happening, and how is it impacting access across the state of North Dakota?
Of course. So I guess if I can actually take it back to the trigger ban, because I feel like that's some helpful context to understand where we are now. So the trigger ban was a law that was passed in 2007, which said that if Roe is ever overturned, then abortion would become banned in North Dakota. And a lot of states had similar bans, but North Dakota's was particularly extreme because it didn't have any exceptions. So basically providing any abortion, even when a person's life is at risk, would have been a felony. And if someone were prosecuted for providing those abortions, they could raise during their prosecution as a defense, I did this to save someone's life, but it would still technically be a crime. So we challenge that under the state constitution, which has very broad protections for individual rights. And in some cases, the North Dakota Supreme Court has found that those state protections for individual rights are broader than the protections in the federal constitution. And so I won't take you through the whole history of that case, but it did go up to the North Dakota Supreme Court, which looked at the language in the trigger ban and its lack of exceptions, and found that, at a minimum, there needs to be an exception to allow people to get abortions to preserve their life and their health. And in fact, in the history of North Dakota, even before territorial days, people were always able to get abortions for those reasons because there were always exceptions that allowed physicians to provide that kind of care. And so that's part of the inherent protections in the Constitution for life and safety. Those protect the right to get an abortion, at least when a person's life or health is at risk. And so shortly after we got that decision, which came down in March 2023, the legislature passed the current ban. It is also a total ban, but unlike the trigger ban, it does have some exceptions. However, those exceptions are very narrow, and frankly, they are so poorly written that doctors don't understand how to apply them to a lot of really common pregnancy scenarios. And in particular, with the health exception, it's not always clear how it applies in situations where a person has a diagnosed health condition that puts them at high risk of experiencing serious complications like infection or stroke or organ damage. But if the person is currently stable and not yet experiencing those complications, it's not clear if they qualify under that exception. And so what's so interesting about this ban, at least to me, is that it was passed after the Supreme Court said there needs to be a health exception, and yet the legislature still chose to pass a ban that is preventing people from getting abortions in a lot of situations when their health is at risk. And in fact, during the floor debates, this came up that this is not as broad as what the Supreme Court said a health exception needs to be. And yet the law still passed. It took immediate effect in April of 2023. And so it's, kind of a strange situation, but here we are. Sorry, and I can talk about the challenge to that ban as well.
I was just going to say, I'm not surprised that the caution wasn't heeded with our current makeup of our legislature. And it'll be interesting to have Karla speak a little bit more to that as well later. But yes, could you please fill us in a little bit on where we currently are in that process?
Yeah, so we brought another challenge in 2023 after this law was passed. And so we amended the complaint and the trigger ban to now add a challenge to the new law to make sure that people are able to get abortions, at least when their life or health is at risk. And this time we had some OBGYNs who work at hospitals join the case because this is affecting the care that they can provide even when people come in with medical emergencies. Because as I said, if a patient appears to be stable, but has a situation that could very quickly escalate without getting an abortion, like it's not clear what the hospital is supposed to do in that situation under the law and whether or not they can rely on that exception. And so this is contrary to, the standard of care in medical practice, which is usually to present patients with options and to let the patient decide how they want to balance those options. So if a patient has a condition that is posing a high risk to their health if the pregnancy continues, it should be the patient's decision whether or not they want to take that risk or whether or not they want to get an immediate abortion. And so we filed that in summer of 2023, and we're litigating that case for about a year. Doing a lot of discovery with the state and back and forth in court. And then in September, we got a decision from the trial court in Bismarck, finding that the abortion ban is unconstitutional for two reasons. And the first reason is that the ban is so vague and confusing that it doesn't provide a standard for physicians to know what they need to do to comply with the law. And that's a problem because with criminal laws, people should know what the law is prohibiting them from doing so that they can adjust their conduct accordingly. And this law doesn't give them enough guidance because of how poorly the exceptions, are written. The second reason that the court found that the ban is unconstitutional is that the court found that those individual rights protections in the state constitution for life, liberty, safety, and happiness protect a fundamental right to get an abortion up to the point of viability. So banning abortion then infringes on that right. So that means the state can't ban or regulate abortion before viability unless it's doing so in a very narrow way and unless it can show that those regulations are necessary to achieve some sort of state interest.
I know that was a pretty incredible win on our part. But I also, we've been reading in the papers that the state is actually going through some process to try to lift the stay, or if that's the correct language. Can you tell me about what that means? Period, I guess.
Yes, so the state almost immediately moved to stay the judgment, which is basically putting a pause on the judge's decision while they appeal the case to the North Dakota Supreme Court. And appeals can take several months. So, it would be a pretty big deal if the law went back into effect for several months, particularly after a judge has already found that it's unconstitutional. So first they asked the trial judge in Bismarck, will he stay his own decision? And he said no. But they've now asked the North Dakota Supreme Court if they will stay or pause the decision while the case proceeds through the appellate process. And so we have an argument before the North Dakota Supreme Court this coming Thursday to discuss whether or not they should do that. So at the moment, the judgment is in effect. And so that's the judgment finding that the law is unconstitutional. But again, that's something that the North Dakota Supreme Court is going to decide first, like whether to let it go or whether to allow the law to go back into effect while the appeal proceeds for the next several months. And then ultimately, we're going to have more briefing and argument on the appeal, and they get to review the trial court's decision and decide whether the law goes back into effect permanently or whether they agree that the law is unconstitutional and cannot take effect.
Well, as a North Dakotan, I would say I'm incredibly disappointed with our state with trying to do that and putting people in such dire jeopardy. I think you shared with me earlier that folks should be able to watch that on a YouTube link. Is that correct? Coming up on Thursday?
That is. So the North Dakota Supreme Court does have a YouTube channel, and apologies, I probably should have sent you the link. But yes, so the argument is on Thursday, I believe at 3:15 p.m. Central Time. So you can watch it on the court's YouTube channel, or I'm sure read about it the next day. But yes, hopefully we should know fairly soon what the court is going to do, at least for the next several months while the appeal is pending.
Well, thank you, Meetra, for sharing all that really good information with us today. For people watching, please put questions in the chat. We will have time for all of our panelists to address a few questions towards the end. Meetra, I just want to thank you for, really doing all this work in North Dakota, and you've really become a vital force in working with some of our partners on the ground and people who are impacted. So we really appreciate that. And thank you for your time this morning as well. And we'll make sure to include that YouTube link as well in our follow-up. So anybody out there who wants to tune in and see what's happening is more than welcome to do that. That's a really important part of our activism. But now we're going to move on to our next panelist. This morning we have with us Randi Lahn. Randi is a courageous advocate who has chosen to share her personal abortion story with us today. She'll offer a really powerful perspective on the importance of reproductive rights. So welcome, Randi.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yes, thank you, Randi. Well, first we'll start. Would you please just introduce yourself to everyone and share a little bit about what got you motivated to be here today?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Randi Lahn. Nice to meet all of you. It has taken me some time to kind of get to this point to just step into being courageous and sharing my story with everyone. But I appreciate everyone being here and holding space for conversations like this. Amy and I actually met in 2018 when I lost my son, baby Lammy, and had kind of shared my story back in February of 19. And then we just reconnected probably a month or two ago and really felt called to step forward and advocate for abortion rights, because the decision to share my story is not one that I take lightly. And for me, it's really an act of love and compassion, both for myself and for others who face similar experiences as I have. I believe that sharing my story has the power to shift perspectives and create understanding, especially around an issue that is so personal and complex as abortion.
Thank you, Randi. And I know that you even mentioned just now that you see your story as an act of love and compassion, a compassionate choice. Can you share why this resonates so deeply with you? And also, could you connect it a little bit to some of the laws that influenced your decision making?
Absolutely. So in 2018, I found out in August of 2018 that I was pregnant with our son, baby Lammy. In December of 18, I found out that at my 19-week anatomy scan, that he had some severe heart defects. And Dr. Lassard is on here today, so thank you for being here with us. She's one of my best friends. I grew up with her. And unfortunately, she was the one that had to tell me that there was something wrong and that we had to go deeper into figuring things out. But when I was faced with this challenge, so when I look at this story, I do see it as an act of love and compassion. When I got to Mayo Clinic, I only had a week to do due diligence and figure out what was transpiring. And when I got to Mayo Clinic, we found out a lot more. Our son did not have a left lung. He had severe heart defects. It was rotated sitting back where the lung should have been. And the list goes on. Our son was diagnosed with DeGeorge syndrome. And our geneticist basically said DeGeorge syndrome can be a wide spectrum. And you could have a few misspelled words. Baby Lammy had pages ripped out. So many severe issues. So I do see my story as an act of love and compassion, and choosing to let baby Lammy rest was the hardest decision that I've ever made in my entire life, but it was rooted in the deepest love that I had for him. And I don't view it as abandonment. It was a choice that I made to protect him from suffering. He had severe fetal anomaly, as I just explained, and which came with all these devastating conditions. Once again, severe heart defects, no left lung, multiple other complications other than physical that he would have been faced with. And not only that, is that when we sat in that hospital room and our doctor looked at us in the eyes and gave us the diagnosis of what we were faced with baby Lammy, he said that our son had such severe heart defects that there is a high potential that he goes into cardiac arrest. And as his mother and carrying the child, carrying him, I will mirror his symptoms and I will also go into cardiac arrest. And when he said that to us, my husband looked at us and he looked straight at Dr. Rose in the eyes and he said, "So you're telling me I can lose my wife and my child?" And he said, "Yes." And at that point, we looked at each other and we said, we don't have a choice. And so it was the most devastating news that we had ever received in our entire lives. But this decision that we made together as a couple was made even more difficult by the restrictions we faced. So because North Dakota's gestational age limit, because of the limit, Dr. Lassard was not able to treat me. We could not stay here in North Dakota with our family and make decisions. We literally had basically 1 week, not even, to make decisions. And we were sent off to Mayo. So when we were at Mayo and we were there facing these agonizing decisions, the 22-week cutoff in Minnesota compounded our sense of urgency. There wasn't the time and space needed to fully breathe, to think through what was happening and the painful reality that my husband and I were facing at that time. Instead, we felt the pressure and rushed by the laws that couldn't at all possibly take our unique situation into account. And just to give you guys the perspective, is that when you have to sign a paper to induce labor, you have to wait 24 hours in order to actually start to induce labor. We were at the exact hour for me to induce labor in Minnesota. We were at 22 weeks. We did not have a minute or an hour more in that decision time. I would have had to go to a different state or somewhere else in order to save my life, basically. So that's why I feel so strongly about advocacy. No one should have to race against arbitrary legal deadlines, I feel, while making that difficult and personal decision. By sharing my story, I hope to bring change so that others truly don't ever have to be in the position that we were in, because I say this over and over, it doesn't come with a manual. No one says you have to do this, and this. You're shocked, you're overwhelmed, and you're making these decisions in this hospital room that these lawmakers are not sitting next to you having to make these decisions. And sometimes I would like to invite them in. I don't want to go through it ever again, but honestly, like, being in that room, having to make those decisions is not something I want for anyone in their entire lives.
Randi, thank you. When you were saying first of all, I want to thank you for sharing all of that, because I know it is emotional, and I really think it's amazing that you are taking, embracing your story and sharing it, so that, because as we discussed when we had coffee, like, you're not alone in this experience. So many people have had the politicians in their doctor's offices while they're making decisions that impact their health and their lives. One of the other things that we discussed was really that, and this kind of goes to that a bit, is that there's a significant stigma around abortion, whether it's medically necessary or elective, and that stigma often silences people and creates feelings of disconnect, and it creates feelings of shame, probably very intentionally. But how are you using your story to challenge and break down those barriers?
First and foremost, honestly, just to give you the human reality side of one little nugget, was my husband and I literally looked at each other, and I remember him saying to me, like, "Randi, we can't tell people that we induce labor, because technically one thing that I had to really understand as a human was that abortion is the medical term. No matter how I wanted to think about it, saving my husband or saving my child's life or not, you know, saving my life, like it didn't matter. Abortion was the umbrella term and medical term. And I remember talking to Dr. Lassard about this and going back and forth. And like, I just kept telling her, like, I don't get it. I don't understand, because that's not what I had. And kind of, Pierre literally said to me, like, Randi, we're going to have to tell people we miscarried, because if we tell people that we had an abortion, like, what is it going to be like? What are the conversations we're going to have? And so the fact that we even had to question and think about, like, we have to like lie, or we have to fib, or we have to not be honest because we're going to be judged based on me saving my life and doing what's best for our son. So that's just like a little, seems like a small reality, but it's a really big one. And so like, I feel as I listen to politicians and, you know, I had baby Lammy in 18, and just hearing, you know, some politicians and I remember one specifically, his daughter was up on the screen, and I had just received a letter from Mayo Clinic stating that my baby had a heartbeat of 164 and you chose to induce labor. Therefore, you had an abortion and your insurance company paid, but they took your money back. And here's a $30,000 bill that you have to pay because you just had an abortion. Well, guess what? I didn't want to leave the hospital without my son. I didn't want to cremate him. I didn't want to have a baptism for him. I didn't want to bury him in the Mayo Clinic cemetery. I didn't want to do, like, I did not choose to do that, right? So I think that I made the choice out of love and compassion, but it wasn't the choice I wanted to make. I want to be a mom. I want to have a healthy baby, right? And so the public conversation around abortion often feels to me very detached. And from the reality that people like me face. And I think it's such a general term, once again, that I really struggle that people have such a concrete picture of it. The loudest voices in the debate tend to focus on politics or morality, rarely acknowledging the deeply personal, often painful like experiences behind these decisions. And I think that's the hardest part is I am not here to advocate politics. I'm literally here to just advocate for me being able to make the choice that I did. When I hear abortion discussed as it's just a moral or political issue, I do truly feel that it does erase the compassion, the care, and just everything that goes into making these tough choices. So my decision to have an abortion wasn't about convenience or lack of desire for me to be a parent, because obviously it was my first child. That's exactly like what I wanted, is to be a mother. And so I think that when people get this overarching view of it, I just think it's so much more complicated than what people think.
I think
yeah, because I had hopes and dreams of for my baby, but you know, when we learned about a severe condition, severe heart defects, no left lung, like I did have to confront the heartbreaking reality, and I just had to make based on medical information, I had to make the best knowledgeable decision that I could. So once again, speaking, because had I continued the pregnancy, you know, it would have meant that a life suffering for him and invasive procedures, even if he would have survived, which our doctor also said, more than likely he will not make it out of utero, and Randi, you will mirror all of the symptoms he is facing. So it just, I once again was only like not only putting my life at risk, but you know, his as well. So choosing abortion was a medical decision made out of love and protection for both my husband and I and baby Lammy. But in the public narrative, I feel like abortion is often reduced to something that feels very impersonal and very shameful. Like you're shamed for the decisions that you're having to make when people don't know anything. They just hear the word, right? So they don't know every step that we did. They don't know all the emotions, all the physical, mental, everything that like we had gone through in making the decision that we did. For many of us, I think abortion is part of a comprehensive healthcare, and yet choices like mine are often met, once again, with the judgment and the misunderstanding as anything but it being a compassionate decision. So speaking out about this has been both empowering and daunting to me a little bit. I do tend to share my story just with people like around me. But right now I feel like by sharing my story, I know I'm opening up myself to criticism, to people who may never understand. And I just have faced the reality inside my own heart that I'm okay with that. I'm okay with people not understanding it. But I also feel extremely responsible to bring compassion and humanity into this conversation. I feel like God's leading me, especially for families who have faced similar heartache. I know that when people hear a story like mine, they'll begin to see abortion for what it is, a deeply personal healthcare decision, often made in the most challenging and painful circumstances. So I do feel like there is that lack of compassion in how society does talk about it, Amy. Especially in situations where both the parents and the baby's lives are at stake, as like in my case. Silence only deepens our misunderstanding. And when I do share my story and talk to other women, and some will share with me, I had one about a month ago. She said, Randi, like I went through something similar, but she doesn't talk about it. And so I get that a lot, where I am open, because we share, like, I also have had 2 miscarriages. So we've lost 3 babies. They're all in heaven. And we have a daughter who will be 5 in February. And, they are part of our story. It's her brother and her sissies. And so I just think, like, once you open the conversation and you talk about it, there are more people that are suffering in silence because of it, because they're afraid to speak out, as was I at a certain point. So
I was just going to jump in and say that thank you so much for sharing your story, and really sharing abortion stories is vital, because it does break down that stigma. It fosters understanding across all kinds of people, and it strengthens the fight for reproductive freedom. And like you said, like as you share your story individually, people are sharing theirs with you. The more we do that, the more power that we have, and the more less power we can give the legislature to be making our personal medical decisions. So I wanted to thank you for sharing your story. We're going to move on. So thank you.
Yes, you're very welcome.
Yes.
I appreciate it. And one last little just quick thing is that I really, you guys kind of saw my daughter buzzing around, but a really big thing for me is that just teaching her that you can use your voice and share your story. And, luckily I am here, and I do have another one, that is alive and with us, and we're very blessed. And I just feel like, because I could make that choice for myself, that I was able to be a mother here on earth. So thank you.
Thank you. And if you have a second, you should drop in the chat over there and read some of the comments, because people have been saying a lot of nice things in there and supporting you in this journey. So
thank you so much. And thank you to everybody for listening. I appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you, Randi. We're now going to talk a little bit more about the legislature, because they're the ones that are, deciding to make these medical decisions for people like Randi and others. So we have with us today Representative Karla Rose Hanson. Most of you probably know Karla. She is a fierce advocate for reproductive rights. Karla and I first crossed paths back in 2014 when we worked together to defeat the abortion ban, which was called personhood. Since that time, she's really been a true champion of the state legislature for reproductive health. Recently reelected, and she'll be going back to Bismarck in January and has some new bills that she's already working on to protect access to birth control and to IVF. So Karla, welcome. I'm going to just start right away and ask you, can you just give us a quick glimpse into what the current legislative makeup is and what the climate is there for reproductive health?
Sure. Well, thank you for having me. And I also just want to pause and say thank you again to Randi for sharing your personal story, incredibly powerful. And also thank you to Meetra for being a part of the legal fight. Thank you for being part of this fight with us. So it makes a huge difference to have a lot of different aspects to the advocacy work. So my work is in the North Dakota House. I've been serving in the North Dakota House since 2016. And as Amy said, my work with the fight to stand up for reproductive rights started actually in 2013 before I was elected. And I felt called as just a citizen to testify against a whole swath of anti-choice bills that were going through the legislature at that time, including what ended up being the Personhood Amendment on the ballot in 2014. So the North Dakota legislature sure has a long history of being against reproductive rights, even before that time when I did that advocacy work, and obviously all the way through 2023 when we passed the near total abortion ban that Meetra described to us. So we certainly have a tough landscape in the North Dakota legislature. In terms of political party, the North Dakota legislature is obviously heavily weighted toward the Republican Party. It's about, roughly 89% Republicans, 11% Democrats. There are a few Republicans who believe in reproductive freedom and privacy in the doctor's office, but it is certainly a tough landscape. And now with the recent election, we see the potential for more extreme legislation coming through in the 2025 legislative session. I worry, and I know my constituents share this worry, that some of the far right legislators will feel emboldened by the actions related to Dobbs and our state level abortion ban and want to take things to the next level related to other types of reproductive healthcare services, such as contraception and IVF.
Yes, thank you, Karla. And that kind of leads us right into that sort of next question. Like, given the current anti-choice majority at the state legislature and how things are unfolding federally, how do you see that climate affecting our ability to protect and expand reproductive rights? And tell us a little bit more about those bills.
So the bills I'm planning to introduce in 2025 really aim to proactively protect contraception and IVF. They say that patients have the right to receive those types of services, and doctors have the right to provide those services without any interference from either state or local government. So for example, we could not, if these bills pass, could not then later pass a bill saying you're not allowed to freeze embryos because that would be interfering with that particular process. Or we couldn't, a county government couldn't say public health is forbidden from, distributing contraception, something like that. So I'm hopeful that people will see that these types of services are not just popular, but medically necessary in many cases. And so I hope my colleagues see the need to proactively protect these. Of course, one of the key aspects to the successful outcome will be everyone on this call and everyone that contacting your legislators and saying, please support those bills. Please vote yes on those bills so that we don't have to worry about those other services.
We will definitely make sure people get in contact with organizations that can help them do that and support your work. I did have one quick question that wasn't pre-prepared, but we've talked a lot about this being a personal decision and not a political decision, and it really shouldn't be a partisan issue that people are talking about. For the bills that you're drafting, do you have some bipartisan partners joining in that effort?
So the typical timeline is you would file your bills in January, and that's usually when you would get the co-sponsors that you would have on your bill. And I always strive to make things a bipartisan approach. I try to approach things in a very collaborative way as well. We've worked with stakeholders to write the bill, and I know there's some people on the call who've been helping me make sure that the language is on target. So that'll be kind of the timeline of when we get the co-sponsors, but I certainly hope to get some Republicans. I'm a Democrat, so I hope to get some Republicans on board the bills who are already supportive of things like IVF and contraception.
Very good. Well, thank you, Representative Rose Hanson, really for your dedication to reproductive health and alongside all the priorities that you have, including healthcare, education, affordable childcare, all those things that you work so diligently on. So thank you for serving us at the state legislature. We have one final presenter today, and I want to jump right into that. Danielle Lahn works with us at Prairie Action as our reproductive fellow, and she's been leading our SASS training. So Danielle, would you like to jump right in and tell us a little bit about your connection to Prairie Action and that work?
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you for having me. My name is Danielle Lahn. I use she, her pronouns, and I started a fellowship with Prairie Action North Dakota Institute, PANDI for short, back in January of 2022, maybe. Oh my gosh, it's been a couple years now. Um, I needed an internship for my master's of public health degree, and Amy and I worked on, figuring out how we could do that together. And then I attended a self-managed abortion safe and supported training virtually through Florida. And I was like, Amy, North Dakota needs this. North Dakota needs this information. So how can we do this? So we worked together, right, to figure out a plan on how we can bring SASS trainings to North Dakota. And we've been doing them once a month now for a year and a half. And we've reached over 150 people in this project. And we've even done some really awesome research on how SASS programs and SASS trainings really increase knowledge around mifepristone and misoprostol and what folks can expect if they are engaging in self-managed medication abortion. So we started this project and we're not ending it. We're going to keep going.
For people who are listening that might not be familiar with SASS, can you please go ahead and spell out what that means, what the program is, and what the goal is?
Yes, absolutely. So SASS stands for Self-Managed Abortion, Safe and Supported. In this webinar information series, we delve into the World Health Organization's protocols for self-managed medication abortion, specifically talking about mifepristone and misoprostol combined, and also misoprostol alone to self-manage an abortion. We're really sharing information that's made publicly available online by different organizations. And then we also jump into how can we share this information in a way that's less of a legal risk. As we know, there are different laws around the country around aiding and abetting and around sharing and giving advice and all of these things. So we talk with our attendees on how can we now share the information that we just learned with other folks in a way that's more legally protected. And we can do that really by sharing information and not giving advice. So the entire SASS training is all about evidence-based information and not us giving medical or legal advice to anyone.
That's great. I know a big part of your SASS work has included some research components. Could you share some of the findings of what people report after taking the training?
Yes, absolutely. So we did some evaluation studies on the SASS trainings, and we did find an overall increase in self-reported knowledge levels. So folks were feeling like they gained a lot of knowledge about what mifepristone and misoprostol are and how they work in managing an abortion. We also found that folks felt more comfortable after attending a session to then share this information, which is really the goal, right, of trying to disseminate this information as far and as wide as we can. Because we do feel that everybody should have this base knowledge of how to manage their reproductive health. We also found that folks indicated that they were more likely to share the information now that they had that background knowledge and that foundation level knowledge. Folks also, we had some open response questions, and folks felt really grateful to be able to learn this information in an auditory way. Again, we're sharing information that's already made available so folks can read it, but in an auditory way, we're able to really grapple with that information and practice is talking out loud about the information as well. So lots of overall positive feelings regarding SASS trainings.
Do you have any plans for some future trainings even before the end?
Do we have plans? Yes, we host these on a monthly basis, or I should say I facilitate these on a monthly basis. Our next one will be December 17th. And that link, that registration link is in our Prairie Action North Dakota link tree. And then we'll continue doing them monthly. So follow Prairie Action North Dakota on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, and you can always catch up on when the next SASS training is.
Thank you, Danielle. Thank you for doing the training, for being brave and bold in providing the information. And I feel like we might have a good influx of folks deciding that they need this information and they need to be able to share it with their loved ones. So hopefully folks on this call and in their networks will sign up and we'll keep moving this forward as best we can and have a lot of people there in December. So thank you for being here.
Thank you.
So I wanted to thank our full panel. This was an amazing conversation. Remind you all that every person that spoke today is an advocate here in North Dakota. They're people who are working to protect our reproductive rights and access to health. And we have a really pretty powerful community of organizations and leaders that also help with this work. So Pandy, us at Prairie Action, feel very deeply privileged to work with a great coalition of so many powerful reproductive groups here in North Dakota. I wanted to mention some of those groups and let you know all this information will be provided in a follow-up email, and it's also on the YouTube video. But to let you know, the Prairie Abortion Fund, which is formerly the WIN, Women in Need Abortion Fund, is led by Destiny Spaeth, and they kind of bridge the gap for people who need abortion care by offering financial assistance to folks who need it for travel to and from in the upper Midwest and for other reasons. All these organizations' links will be dropped in the chat if you want to do something with them, work with them, volunteer with them, donate to them. Additionally, we also work with Planned Parenthood of North Dakota. That group is led by Katie Christensen. They mobilize supporters of all parties to defend and increase access to family planning, to abortion, and to medically accurate comprehensive sex education. And you should note that Planned Parenthood is, I believe, the only organization providing comprehensive sex education in the state of North Dakota. So make sure you check out that link and connect with them on some of those issues. We also work with Gender Justice. Gender Justice is a Minnesota organization that recently came into North Dakota and is led by Christina Sanborn, an attorney in Bismarck. They're along with the Center for Reproductive Rights on our abortion cases. They combined litigation with public education to change the public narrative on a couple of different important issues that advance gender equity. We also work with the ACLU of North Dakota. That's led by Cody Schuler. And they work in communities and legislatures and in the courts to preserve our rights and our liberties that are enshrined within the Constitution. They have a lot on their plate, but they also put some of that time to reproductive rights in North Dakota. So they're another org that you can look into if that's a value aligned with you. And then finally, but last but not least, we do obviously work very closely with the Red River Women's Clinic. That clinic is led by Tammy Kromenacher. They were the only abortion provider in North Dakota for 20 plus years. But after the US Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade in June of 2022, they made the commitment to continue care, but they needed to do that by relocating. So they're now located in Moorhead, Minnesota, maybe 2 miles from their previous clinic. They are the same clinic, they're the same staff, they're the same doctors, and they're just in a different location. So there are links there for people who might need them as a resource, or if you want to connect with them on another level. They have volunteer opportunities, and of course, we'll always seek donations as well. So those are the groups that we work with very closely to do this work in North Dakota. As we move towards legislative session, all of them would provide great information to you. So please make sure to connect with them. So at this point, we do have a few minutes left in that question and answer time. So I'm going to see if Caitlin Walksmith works with us at Pandy. Are there some questions that you'd like to read out to the panelists?
Yes, we did have a couple. I have a question for Karla from Melissa. She's wondering if this will include prescription by mail or if that's going to be affected.
Thank you for the question. There is nothing specifying how the medication will be delivered other than the contraception bill does say both prescription and over-the-counter medications. So we don't specify like also by mail. Obviously, there's some separate litigation happening about that, maybe nationally, but it doesn't specify that. Just over-the-counter and prescription is highlighted.
Thank you for that. And then one more question for you, Karla, from Molly. Just how can we best support you through these endeavors?
Yeah. Well, I'd say number one, know who your state legislators are. So if you don't already know, you can go to the North Dakota Legislature website and enter in your address, and that will tell you who your legislators are. And contact them before the legislative session starts in January. And just tell them what your priorities are at a high level. You don't have to be specific about, certain bills, but just say, I'm a constituent of yours. This is my address. You can be brief. You can be professional and polite, but just say, these are my priorities. And I really want you to vote in a way that protects reproductive freedom, and whether that be voting for bills that protect these services or against bills that erode these services or cause politicians to be in my doctor's office. And then when the legislative session starts in January, groups like Prairie Action will help us track specific bills and I would imagine do some action alerts to say in a very specific way to your legislator, like vote yes on, House bill, blah, 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 or vote no on, Senate bill, blah, blah, blah. And that would be a more specific way of of making your voice heard. But I would encourage just developing that relationship even before January with your legislator.
Thank you, Karla. I think Sydney is just going to follow up with a couple action words for us.
Yeah, awesome. This has been an awesome conversation. And I know some of us are probably feeling ready to take some action. We have a couple different opportunities for you guys. I am a leader of a program that is hosted here at Prairie Action called the North Dakota Megaphone. This is an opportunity to grow your digital advocacy skills. It's sort of a social media volunteer opportunity. There will be an introduction Zoom call next Thursday. Following that, some additional calls to action. The Equal Rights Amendment era now has a Grand Forks meeting today, actually. If you're discouraged about the election results, they are totally with you. They would love for you to go and join them for some post-election camaraderie. They'll be making some postcards. They have some additional action alerts that you will be able to join in on. We will share those links in the chat. And then the First United Women of Fargo meeting is set. So please join fellow like-minded women for an evening of community and discussion as they determine the next steps as to how to move forward as a group. The date that will take place Tuesday, November 19th, 5:30 to 7:30 at Bruhala here in Fargo, if you're around. And then finally, we would highly encourage y'all to sign up for the Prairie Briefing, which is also hosted by us here at Prairie Action. You can stay up to date on all things news in North Dakota. That'll be very helpful during the legislative session. So again, those will be in the chat for you guys. Those are already in there. So thanks so much.
All right, well, with that, we're right on time. I want to thank all of our panelists for participating today and for fighting for reproductive rights in North Dakota in your own unique ways. You're incredibly valuable to us. I want to thank everybody who came today and spent the time listening. I know we're in some really challenging times and sometimes it feels like we just can't get ahead, but I think this morning helps us to understand that there's a lot of people who share our values. And that coming together helps us to connect and be more powerful together. I want to really thank Randi for sharing her personal story. I know that that's not easy, but I also know that this was a perfect place and a perfect community in order to start that journey for her. And as you see her out in the community sharing her story more widely, please do all you can to share her, support her on that journey. And then finally, I just want to also acknowledge that because it has been a difficult time for reproductive rights, I hope that everybody on this call does find some time to rest and rejuvenate and connect and touch grass, as they say, so that we can be as strong and as powerful as we can as we head into some really significant battles. And like I said, all the information will come to you in an email. All those wonderful organizations you can connect with are doing incredible work. You can certainly find a place that you can put more and more of your time and your talent and your voice into if you like. And with that, we'll see you next month. Have a nice weekend.